Alright designers, I'm going to show you how to create an interactive PDF that is going to include animated content, navigation buttons, hyperlinks, video, and write-in fields. This animated content would not play in a normal PDF or print format, so I'm going to show you as well how you can export the final draft in interactive PDF so that it plays with all of your media. And make sure you guys are following along by pausing the video and trying for yourselves. To start off, we're going to create a new file in InDesign, and we're going to select the web preset. And now we're going to be adding a lot of interactive content to this document, so we want to select the smallest web preset, which is 800 by 600 pixels. And hopefully this will mitigate some of the large content that we'll be adding to this document so that it doesn't take forever to load. We're going to call the document Interactive Brochure, and we're going to give it 4 pages. I also want to add 2 columns to each page so that it helps me to build some of the content in my brochure design. Then I'm going to click Create. Before I start adding content, I need to start working on the navigation, and the navigation will be showing on all of the 4 pages. So I'm going to create the navigation items on the master page, or if you're working on the latest version of InDesign, you're going to be working on the parent page. So I'm going to double click on the master or parent page, and I'm going to use this as my guide for creating some of the navigation content. I know that I want all of the actual brochure content to be at the top, and I want people to access the navigation buttons on a bar at the lower end of the page. So I'm going to create a frame to remind me where I need to place content. This one will remain empty for the time being. Then I'm going to create a separate frame below that, which I'm going to fill with color. So for the bottom frame, I'm going to go to the swatches and select one of the swatches that are available. I'm just going to select a green for now, and in fact, if you don't like the default swatches that they make available for you on InDesign, you can double click on the swatch itself and you're going to get the color picker spectrum so that you can select a more specific color to your needs. So I'm going to go with a dark forest green for now because I'm going to be using a lot of images of forest life. You can always change it later if you change your mind. Having now added that bar of color, I'm going to start creating my navigation buttons. For my navigation buttons, I just want to make some really simple arrows. So I'm going to select the polygon tool, and then I'm going to double click anywhere in the document so that I can add the number of sides for my polygon tool. So I know I want to make them simple arrows, hence I'm just going to make them triangles, 3 sides, the start inset of 0%, and I'm going to drag out a triangle, and I'm going to make this triangle have a no stroke with a fill of, again, a bright green. And before I start adding any of the interactive content to the arrow, I'm going to go and add some corner options by going to Object and Corner Options so that I can make them a little bit rounder and make them look a little bit more interactive. I'm also going to add some effects by going to Window and Effects and applying a drop shadow to make it look a little bit more 3-dimensional as well. Remember, when you add drop shadows, less is more. You do not want to overdo it with the drop shadow. I'm rotating the button itself so that it faces left because this is going to be my go to previous page button. And to make my life easier, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just duplicate this button by holding down Alt and dragging, and then I can just rotate it so that this is going to be my go to next page button. So you should have a minimum of 2 navigational buttons. I'm going to keep them simple and just have a go to next page and go to previous page button. Now it's time to actually make them interactive. So I'm going to select button number 1. I'm actually in the Interactive for PDF workspace, but I'm going to reset it because I have several other things in my workspace I don't need. And now I should have several different panels that are going to let me add those interactive items. If you don't see the Interactive for PDF workspace, you can always just go to Window and Interactive and look for each of those panels there as well. So to start off, I'm going to select Buttons and Forms with the first arrow selected, and I'm going to select Type and then Button, and I'm going to call this one Go Back. You don't have to name it, but it does help to be able to identify it. For the event, it means how do you want users to use this interactive button. So I want them to actually have to click on the button to go to the previous or next page. So I'm going to select on click. There's several different options you can select from as well. For actions, I'm going to click the plus arrow, and then I can select what this button is going to do. So I want it to go to the previous page every time the viewer clicks on it. Under appearance, you also have the ability to go and select different colors. So when you roll over the button, I want them to see a different color. I don't want them to see that lime green. So with rollover selected, I can go in the swatches and select, let's say, cyan, so that the person knows when it's changing color, it means that they are about to select a different state for the button. This is completely optional. You guys don't need to select different appearances. I just think that it does help. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the second button. Under Type, I'm going to select Button again. I'm going to name it Go to Next. Event, I'm going to select on click. For action, I'm going to select Go to Next Page. And once again, I'm going to be adding that different color for when the person rolls over the button. So basically hovers their mouse over the button, then it should be changing to cyan. I can always change the colors later if I decide. So now, because we were working in the master page, you can see that whenever I go to any of the other pages, these buttons are reflected. So they're going to be uniform throughout. I have one more thing that I want to do for my master page. So I'm going to go back to my master page, and I'm going to drag out a frame over on this side of the bar. And this one is just going to say, Welcome to the Enchanted Forest, and I'm going to be adding a hyperlink that people can click on to learn more information. Remember, as you guys are adding typography, you should be selecting fonts that help to enhance the theme you selected. Okay, so I have the text that I want on the navigation to be activated with a hyperlink. So with the text selected, I'm going to go to Window, Interactive, and I'm going to select Hyperlinks. And this is where I'm going to be able to add some URLs so that when people click on that title, it's going to take them to a website. And I already have a URL for a wiki page for the Enchanted Forest from Frozen. So I'm going to copy the URL. And then back in InDesign, all I have to do is paste it in. And now in the tab, it tells me the name that I selected. And then this little green icon tells me that the URL is active, so that when people are ready to click on it, it's going to take them to the right page. It would be giving you a red dot if the URL was not active or if you pasted it incorrectly. I'm going to start previewing some of this before I continue. So to preview, I'm going to go to Window, Interactive, and I'm going to select Epub Interactivity Preview. It's going to tell me momentarily that it cannot preview with the master page selected, so I'm just going to go and double click on page 1 just so that I can preview what the navigation looks like. So if I go and hover my mouse over the buttons, I can see that they're active. And if I hover my mouse over the hyperlink, I can see that that hyperlink is active because I'm seeing that the link was activated on my browser here. So far, so good. I'm going to make some minor changes, just moving the buttons down slightly on my master page before I start working on page 1 and page 2 and all the other pages within my document. Okay, so now that I'm done with most of the master page, I'm going to go into page 1 and I'm going to start adding some content. I know for sure I'm going to add an image, so I'm going to add a frame. And I'm going to click Control D to place an image of the forest. And I'm taking all my images from pexels.com. I can see that the view is very pixelated, and the reason for that is because, remember, we're just linking the image, we're not embedding it. What that means is that if I delete the image from my downloads folder right now, I'm going to get a message from InDesign saying that there's an error because it's no longer linked. But to mitigate that problem, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, select fitting and fill frame proportionately so I can see the image fully. And I can also go into view and display performance, and I can select high quality display so that I shouldn't see the blurry image anymore. I am going to also be adding a little bit of a title here. So I'm going to drag out a text frame. And in fact, I might want to go and copy some of the formatting that I have down here in the navigation. So I can just copy and paste that and then change the content that it actually says. So this one might be where magic lurks. Obviously, I'm just making it up, and you guys are going to play around with the structure of the word. Now, I know that I want to use the color scheme in this image for pretty much every page in the document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my color scheme tool on InDesign. I'm going to click color theme tool, and then click inside the image. And you guys are going to see that InDesign starts sampling the colors in the image and giving me a series of swatches that I can go and save by clicking right here. It's going to say add this theme to swatches, so that if I want to use this exact same mossy green on the title, all I have to do is highlight the title with the type tool, and then when I go into the swatches in my control bar and scroll down, I'm going to select where it says colorful theme, and I'm going to have the same exact colors that InDesign just sampled from this image. So this is a really great way for you to have the same unified colors throughout your whole document. I know I'm going to add a minor stroke to this title, and I think I'm going to add a little bit of a drop shadow as well so that it stands out from the background. All of this is extra. Again, you guys know with drop shadows you want to go with less is more. You don't want to overdo it. The idea is that it's going to stand out just a little bit more from the background image. So what I really want is for this title to actually animate. With the title selected, I'm going to go to Window Interactive, and I'm going to select Animation. For the preset, I can select different ways for the title to animate, so I just want to keep it simple, and I want to select Fade In. There are several different options that are going to make it look like it's dancing, waving, bouncing, rotating, and so forth, but I'm going to keep it very basic. I'm going to select Fade In, and then the event will be basically when it's going to animate. So is it going to animate when I load the page? Is it going to animate when I click on it? Is it going to animate when I just kind of hover my mouse over it? I just want it to be on page load. It animates automatically. And then for the duration, I can select how long it's going to do that, and I'm just going to keep it maybe on a loop. I'm going to preview this by again going to Window Interactive and Epub Interactivity Preview. and I can see that it's animating right here. It is a little fast, so I either want to keep it off the loop or I want to slow it down so it's not just set to 1 second. But so far so good. Before I move on to the next pages, I'm actually going to go and try to match some of the colors in my master page to the color theme that I selected. So I want this this green bar to match the exact same dark green that was being used in the image. And I think for the buttons, I'm gonna also change them to that mossy green, just so that they're a little bit more uniform. Okay, and now I'm ready to move on to page 2. And then for page 2, this is gonna be like a history of kind of page. So I'm gonna start out by using my frame tool, and I know I want to have an image to illustrate the page, and I also want to have a text frame. So I'm just using the gridify method to add those two, and I'm going to be resizing some of the content here so I can add a more descriptive title. For my heading here, History of the Enchanted Forest, I think I'm going to add the exact same animation. So I'm going to go back to my animation tab, and then I'm going to select the same exact preset. I just want it to fade in upon page load, and I'm going to leave the same presets that I was using before. And then I'm going to start adding some more content. So I might want to go in and use my type tool and add some placeholder text, because I'm not really interested in writing out a whole narrative. This is just for a sample project. I'm going to select a slightly more basic font. I'm going to select Garamond, and I'm going to go to the type menu and select fill with placeholder text. Here I just want to start creating a frame. So I am going to enable a stroke of a light mossy green. I'm going to keep it about 5 points, maybe 4 points. And I'm going to add a corner option, and inset corner options, perhaps reverse rounded, because I wanted again to have more of a storybook feel. Remember that when you have it linked, it's going to change all the corners in the frame uniformly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create an object style of this frame so that I can just reuse it every time I'm going to add some content to my document. So I'm going to open up my styles, select object styles, click on new object style, and I'm going to call this one green frame. And then for now, I'm going to just keep this page simple, and I'm going to add an image. Then I'm going to move on to page 3, and in page 3 I do want to have some video content. So for page 3 I'm going to add 2 frames using the gridify method. I'm going to make one frame significantly smaller. The first frame is going to be for a heading. Now theoretically I could create a character style so that all my headings are uniform, but because I'm lazy, I'm just actually going to go and copy and paste the formatting that I had on the previous page. I want to format the frame here with the object style that I created earlier. So I'm going to select green frame, and having done that, I'm ready to start placing a video in here. So I'm going to click inside of the frame, Control D to place media. And I have an image, several images, but I have a video that I'm actually going to be adding in here that I downloaded from Pixel's Video. And I'm not going to be able to preview it inside of the frame itself, but I will be able to preview it within the Epub preview panel. For the moment, I'm just going to select fitting and fill frame proportionally. And I'm going to preview the video to make sure it plays perfectly by going to Epub Interactivity Preview. And I'm going to click play. and I can see that the video was placed perfectly. Let me just preview the navigation buttons too while I'm at it, so I can see they're active. All right, on to the next page. For my last page, I want to add some fill-in buttons. This is where people would be able to include their information, and theoretically you would receive it so that you can contact them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my frame tool, and I'm going to drag out a frame for the heading, which I'm just going to copy from one of the previous pages. And I'm doing this because I have very few pages. If I didn't, I would take the time to create a character style to make my life easier. I'm going to take the time to go and make that a little bit more enticing later, but for right now, I want to show you how to create the fill-in buttons. So to create the buttons, I'm actually going to use some rectangle tools, and I'm going to drag out a rectangle, and this is where people would go and add their contact information. So I'm going to format the rectangle first. I want to make sure it's using one of those swatches from earlier, and I am going to duplicate the rectangle because I want to add 3 interactive fill-in buttons. And for the first one, I'm going to go to Window and Interactive, and I'm going to select Buttons and Forms, and under Type, I'm actually going to select Text Field. And now I could name it. This one could theoretically be just user's name. For the event, it's going to be obviously on click. They have to click inside the button in order to write on it. And I'm going to do the exact same thing for each of the next buttons. And now for my previous example, I had gone in and actually labeled these before. So I'll probably do that because theoretically you think the people who are filling this in will want to know what they're submitting. So I'll just go and label this one, maybe name. Okay, now that I have those fields created and I have the labels for them, I'm actually going to be adding an animation here shortly, but I do want to preview that they actually work. So I'm going to go to Window, Interactive, and I'm going to select Epub Interactivity Preview and click play, and I should see that they are active. I'm having a little bit of a hard time deciphering if they're active. They look like they're active based on these icons that I'm looking at in the bottom of every rectangle, but I can also go and preview it by exporting the PDF and previewing that this content is correct before I submit my final draft. So to continue where I left off, I'm going to be adding some more interactive content here. I'm going to be adding an image as well. And I'm going to be adding a very small animation to that image to further my interactive content. I actually downloaded a vector object that I want to use. Here it is. I'm just going to rotate it quickly by going to transform, flip horizontal, and then placing it in. And I feel like this furthers the theme of my design so far, and I want to animate it by going to Window, Interactive, and Animation. And under Preset, I'm actually going to go with a more fancy animation. And I'm going to select on page load, and I just want it to play just the one time. And I'm going to preview it again by going to my Epub Interactivity Preview. And just make sure that it does the job. Now, you need to be aware that sometimes when we take the time to export this as a PDF, some of the animated content does not play, but it's there. For the purposes of you showing me that you did it on Canvas, you might want to go and take some kind of like video showing me that you added this interactive content and adding that video file as proof along with your final draft in PDF format. I realized that I forgot to show you guys how you can verify that the media presets are correct. So I'm going to go back to that previous page, and I'm going to go back to Window, Interactive, and I'm going to select Media now. And now here I can actually go and preview the video and make sure that it's playing correctly. And then I can select different options for when it's going to play and what kind of frame you guys would see as a preview of the video on the PDF. So I want to select play on page load, meaning that as soon as you load the page, the video starts playing by default. And under poster frame, I'm actually going to select an image. I'm going to select choose image, and then I'm going to add one of the images that I downloaded previously as the preview for that video. You can also just leave it as from current frame or standard if you don't necessarily know what to set it to, but I thought this created a far more interesting design. So I do have some editing to do on some of the actual content, the written content in here, but as far as the interactive material, I'm pretty much done. All I have to do now is just create the transitions. You'll see that whenever I previewed, it just basically flipped to the next page, but I want to create a slightly more interesting transition from each of the 4 pages. So I'm going to go to Window, Interactive, and I'm going to select Page Transitions. And then this is pretty similar to what you might expect when you're editing a video and creating a transition between the clips or creating some kind of PowerPoint presentation. There's several different transition types that you can select from. Some of them, quite frankly, are a little cheesy, like the dissolve transition. So you want to consider when you're selecting a transition how that's going to enhance or possibly take away from the theme of your project. So I'm just going to create a pretty basic transition. I think I'm just going to have it fade from one page to the next. And then you can also select a different speed that the transition is going to play, and I want it to be pretty slow. I'm going to preview one last time before I export my final draft by going to Epub Interactivity Preview. I think that should be okay. Having made some final edits, I'm ready to export. So I'm going to go to File, Export, and I'm going to save it as a PDF interactive. It's very different from a PDF print because a PDF print will not play any of the media and it will not have any hyperlinks or any other interactive content. So make sure you guys select PDF interactive, and I'm going to name this one Final Draft. I'm going to click Save, and it's going to warn me that some of the media content may not play back when I export the final draft. I'm aware of that, so I'm going to click Continue. I'm going to export my pages as pages and not spreads. I am going to have the presentation open in full screen mode. The page transitions are basically going to be from the document, so they're going to be the ones that I worked on previously. If I had forgotten to add page transitions, I could theoretically select them from this panel, and then I'm going to make sure that the forms and media are all included, although I know for a fact that some of it might be a little bit lost in the export process. However, I'm still going to click Export, and now I'm going to click OK. It's telling me some of my text is overset, but again, that was just placeholder text, so I'm not necessarily that interested. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to let that export fully. Okay, so this is my document after exporting. I can see, unfortunately, the animation that I had created for these headings is lost upon exporting, but I can see that the hyperlink is active, and I can see that the navigation buttons are active as well. I can see I have some editing to do on the video because for whatever reason it's not playing, and I can see that my write-in fields are active. So, not too bad altogether. I definitely do need to fix this page right here because the video should be playing, and there's not much I can do about the animation, sadly, unless I export it in a different format. However, that pretty much wraps up this tutorial, so you can hit me up if you have any questions, and I can't wait to see your work. Peace out.